Hello, everybody. So, welcome to our Christmas edition Flutter Web event. This is a collaboration with Flutter Nordic and Flutter Berlin. And so the agenda is going to be first, Thanos Gavos gonna talk about how business can view Flutter Web and what are the opportunities that are there for business. Um, then Salih is gonna talk us about how you can facilitate like Firebase and into a Flutter Web project. And then Majid is also kind of present his Flutter Web talk. And on the end, we're going to have all the questions and ask me anything with Mariam, who is the product owner of Flutter Web. So without further ado, let me put on stage Thanos. And hey, Thanos, how are you?
Very well, Efemi. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So the stage is yours. If you want to share your slides, it will be awesome as well.
Excellent. Just doing this as we speak. Let me know if you can say this.
Yeah, stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, I guess after thinking long and hard about it, we've been talking mostly in these events about Flutter, the different components, the different libraries, when it comes to code deep dives. But essentially, this is much more an opportunity for any business leaders, any owners out there to understand and pitch for Flutter as the single code base, one source of truth when it comes to the development. So I'll just quickly tell you the narrative, the story I had in mind, trying to address much more the business needs rather than the code deep dives. And I guess it all starts with the only thing that is constant is change. As we know, a famous saying from Heraclitus, and is much more relevant nowadays because everything is changing, and we've seen this with many different things. But when it comes to all companies, because fundamentally, if you're using systems, you are a tech company. That's the saying. Nowadays, an e-commerce or a traditional brick and mortars business has so many different channels they need to cater for, but they also have evolving needs, the customer needs, the expectations. Things have changed. SLAs and when it comes to deliveries of 5 working days are not relevant anymore. You're expecting things much quicker. Channels to cater for. And with that, we're talking about the brick and mortars. Usually, it was the tradition of the physical space. It evolved into the digital when it comes to web channels, and obviously now mobile applications with the rise of smartphones. The craft skills have changed and evolved as well, but same has the cost of operations. And with this, it's almost like going back in time, back in the 1950s, post Second World War, where things were much more around consumers trying to make ends meet. It was just the basics, survival, just getting food on the table. And traditionally, you had channels like shops, the physical spaces. The crafts and skills required were much more generic and admin, and the cost of operations much more predictable. Then the evolution, 2000s, it was much more about satisfying those evolving needs. It's not just about make ends meet anymore. You had obviously the web, all the different technologies, the internet that made possible online shopping, and quickly there was a shift towards building websites, and web specialism became a mandatory fundamental craft. Similarly, the cost of operation increased because then, apart from the admin and the predictable costs you had much more increased overheads just purely based on the new craft, the new skills, the new capabilities that you have to develop. And now in the 20s, we're talking about needs on a personalized level. The marketing of one. How can I personalize as a business, essentially product recommendations, all the different results to cater for increasing revenue, average order value, and so on and so on. Channels right now are web, mobile, and many more things from wearables, IoT. There are things fundamentally that require more attention and more skills. And this is where the web, mobile, digital specialisms have essentially created an exponential situation when it comes to cost of operations. With that narrative in mind, what essentially we say is the change brought a proliferation of different frameworks, different technologies to cater for those changing and evolving needs. All these are pretty popular frameworks when it comes to front end, back end, but fundamentally it serves the same purpose, consumer or customer needs. And this is much more the attempt of the businesses to understand how they can be top of mind when it comes to consumers. And with that, it almost changed the very anatomy of the tech companies that serve those needs. As a reminder, if you are a business that has websites or mobile propositions, you're a tech business fundamentally. And you have to cater and really focus on adding value to consumers through those channels, especially because it's the channel of choice nowadays. So this is much more the traditional. If you think about deploying a value proposition on Apple Store, Play Store, website, this is a representative resource profile when it comes to Android engineers, test engineers, mobile designers, but also iOS engineers, specifically for that platform, and web engineers. There are obviously skill sets that you require, like product owners, DevOps, and security, that can be split across different platforms. But fundamentally, those test engineers, Android, iOS, and especially the web, have a very narrow focus on those platforms specifically. And this is where Flutter essentially comes in. It comes in as the single code base through which you can deploy propositions that customers love with a lower total headcount and therefore lower operational cost. It doesn't mean that you don't need the iOS or Android skill set anymore. And I'm not talking about pure play Android or iOS, but you need Flutter engineers who have deployed across iOS and Android. Flutter makes that easy, and makes that easier for web as well. There is some road ahead when it comes to maturity and replacing fundamentally other technologies, but it's something that for lightweight implementations right now, it definitely can cater for when it comes to web. And whilst having, I'm saying, a material impact on the overall speed to value, because fundamentally, as we said, companies are all about creating value to end consumers and customers. What this creates is almost like a flywheel. You get a single cross-platform code base that you can develop once and deploy across different platforms. You get an accelerated speed of development, obviously because the framework is quite intuitive. I think pretty much I'm talking at the Flutter Greek community event, so pretty much I know we're all fans of it. But it's also about addressing the concerns on reduced time to market, increase the frequency of releases, or any security concerns, because again, with cybersecurity, proliferation of technologies, different channels, that becomes top of mind for businesses as well. But then you've got, as we said, as a result, and this is where the flywheel gets into motion, the reduced maintainability cost or the lower overall operational cost because of the lower headcount requirements and the reduced, sometimes this is an afterthought, but the reduced recruitment costs, increased retention, and talent attraction. So again, like consumers, employees have choices nowadays. When you fundamentally upgrade to modern technology, there is much more interest when it comes to employees themselves, engineers. Everyone loves the latest tech and the cutting edge technology. And by offering something like that, obviously, you position your business essentially and you set it up for success. You position it in a very competitive market. Because anyone who has tried to recruit engineers or teams in general, I think has felt the pain of not finding enough talent fundamentally. And on that note, is much more about what the Flutter community, a snapshot, what it looks like right now to try and understand the investment, the interest, I guess all the raw power behind it. So right now, and this is just according to Meetup data, Flutter events and communities are very well established across 60 countries. There are 119 groups, 50,000 members. It's an open source framework created and backed by Google. So you've got some heavyweights, you've got acute interest, you've got ongoing development. Open source allows for contribution by so many different engineers, and obviously the members pushing Flutter to the stratosphere. So this is in 10 minutes me talking about the business value of Flutter. Hopefully you found this useful. Feel free, DM me, ping me. If you have any questions, more than happy to have a conversation as well.
Thank you, Thano. Very, very interesting. I think that we need more like the aspect of business into our presentations, just so like they are the stakeholders, they should like know what they're signing up for with Flutter. So thank you, Thanos, for that. And now we are moving to Salih's presentation. Hi, Salih.
Hey man, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really excited because Flutter for Web is a topic that I think most of the time we are forgetting about. So today, having an event only dedicated for it is making me excited, man. Really excited.
Really, and really excited to see what you got for us today. So without further ado, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So, hello everyone. It's really great to be here. I mean, I know it's late for some of you, late and early for some of you, but trust me, today will be an amazing day with the talks that we are going to be having here. And first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Sali. I've been doing Flutter apps for 4 years, more or less now. I've been doing Flutter apps since the alpha stages. I love communities. Like today, we have partnered up with Flutter Greece and Flutter Nordics to bring this meetup up. So I'm one of the organizers of Flutter Berlin meetup, and I am one of the actually the founder of the Flutter Turkey community, and now it is growing enough to be free. I've been working in a Flutter app in my day-to-day job as well. I'm working at a company called Superlist, and we are doing a productivity tool using Flutter, and not only for mobile, but also for desktop. So today I'm going to be talking about Firebase and Flutter for Web. Why did I pick this topic for today? It's actually because of several reasons. The first one is people actually do not know the power of Firebase with Flutter for Web. And for me, the most importantly, there is a new tool that we're going to be showing today to actually build your Flutter for Web application. So in this talk today, the agenda is first we will talk about like Firebase, Flutter, what is Flutter Fire project, which Firebase tools that we can use with Flutter for Web. Then we will be implementing one of them in our application and deploy it by using Firebase CLI tools. If you're ready, let's get going. So if you are here, most likely you have already heard about what Flutter is. Flutter is Google's cross-platform UI toolkit that is allowing us to write the code once and use it across mobile, web, and desktop. By doing this, we also would like to have the most native and most effective performance possible. The goal is enabling developers to deliver this high performance and natural feeling without having extra efforts. Flutter had architected its own SDK in a way that it actually communicates in a native way with the platform that it belongs to. For desktop, which is macOS, Linux, and Windows, and for mobile, which is iOS and Android, it is using the same logic. But for web, it's a bit different. The framework level is more or less the same. We are still communicating by using Dart and its own implementations within the framework. On the other hand, normally with the desktop and mobile, we have a different layered architecture, but in here, we are using the browser level with JavaScript support. In the other ones, we are using C++. And the main difference is, in here, we are relying on the abilities of the browser rather than actually the operating system. Flutter provides a reimplementation of the engine on top of the standard browser APIs. We currently have two options to render the Flutter content on the web, by using HTML or WebGL. In HTML mode, Flutter uses HTML, CSS, Canvas, and SVGs. And for rendering WebGL, Flutter uses a special version of Skia compiled with WebAssembly called CanvasKit. So when you build Flutter applications, you have actually two ways to get the output. While HTML mode offers the best code size and etc., with CanvasKit, if you give 2 megabytes more or less more, you will have the Skia engine performance over there. So I will leave the decision up to you. I will show you how you can use two different web renderers, but at the end of the day, you can pick any of them by your choice, thanks to the changes that we have done in Flutter engine here. So let's move forward. When should we use Flutter for Web? Flutter for Web is actually mainly suggested to use for PWAs, like progressive web apps, and single page applications. So if you don't have any SEO dependency much, you can simply use Flutter for Web and have your best app possible. We have used Flutter for Web for our multiple events that we have done in the last year, and every feedback was really positive. So for advertisement pages, for applications that are also supporting the web, and so on and so forth, you can use Flutter for Web. So now you sit down, you think about it. Okay, now I'm seeing my requirements, and I think I'm going to use Flutter for Web, but I need to be able to actually have a backend, have some technologies to actually have the Flutter work with. And probably you already heard about Firebase for that. Firebase is the platform that has been acquired by Google in 2014. And the idea is they are going to give you some tools, some helpful things that you can use to create products that are reliable. And the most common part is, first, you don't have to have a backend. You can use the Cloud Firestore or some other technologies to keep your data in. On the other hand, you can also use like cloud messaging and analytics tools and many more that has been provided to you by Firebase in your application. But I'm sure if you're coming from native world and so on, or if you have done Flutter apps, you've seen that it is working fine with mobile, but you might be wondering, is it working with Flutter for Web? The idea comes from the project called Flutter Fire. So Flutter Fire is a project that has been done by Invertase, I think it's pronounced, company, and these people gathered together and decided to bring the set of Flutter plugins to the Flutter and the Firebase plugins to Flutter. And the best thing about it is they are trying to support everything possible. So if it is targeted to the web, you can guarantee that it is going to be working for Flutter for Web at the moment. For even desktop, they have made a big progress, and they have now a developer preview going on. So what is Flutter Fire? We already discussed what it is in the sense of the history. But if you go to the a page of like firebase.flutter.dev, you will see a page like this. It will be showing you which platforms. Actually, let me use the laser here so we can there we go. You can see the name of the project, you can see the package page, and you can see the platforms that it's supporting and which phase it is in. So that is the perfect page for you to start with. Go to the firebase.flutter.dev and you will see this. I have cut off some of the libraries because they did not support web. Let's see what they are supporting, which libraries supporting web. Analytics is supporting web. So this is perfect news if you want to get the analytics per page and per visit and per action. And you can see that authentication, meaning that you can do Google sign-in, you can do, I don't know, like anonymous sign-in, email sign-in, and everything that Firebase support by without having an extra effort. You can see Cloud Firestore, functions, cloud messaging for notifications, and like performance monitoring, real-time database, and many more that you can think of is available for you for web. So when you think about it, most of these products are already doesn't cost anything. There are some that is costing, but mainly most of these are for free. So you can actually build a product around this without paying a penny. So how can we implement, or how can we have Firebase in our project? Let's continue with that. So first, let's go to the console.firebase.com. If you go there, it will take you to a page that you can start your new project. You can add your project name here. You can do and say anything you want. It will create a new project in the Google Cloud side for you with the name that is unique. And you need to click on continue. After you create the project and click on continue, it will do whatever it is required. It will give you the resources that you need, and it will take you to the place to create your own projects per platform. Once you land, it will be a page like this. You can see on the left pane that you have different categories like build, release, and monitor, and many more. In the chart that I've showed you before, you can see that the name of the supported libraries can be also seen here. What we are going to be showing you today is first how you can add an app, which means that it can be an iOS, Android, web, desktop, whatever you need to your project, then use it. So you will click on add app here, and it will take you to a page like this. After you click on the web category, you can name the app whatever in the way that you want. This part is a bonus part that I'm going to be showing you about how you can use the hosting. If you don't want to use the hosting, you can just check this off. So it is fine. And you can simply say next, next, and you will be good to go. But if you want to have it, just check this off and pick one of these and just say continue, continue, continue. You don't need to do anything extra at this point. Once you create the project, you are done. Now it is time to go back to our project and actually use the Firebase libraries that is provided to us by Flutter Fire. So one thing that I mentioned was with the latest release of Flutter, there is a new tool from the Flutter Fire team called Flutter Fire CLI. So it's a command line tool that is helping us with some commands to help ease the installation process of Flutter Fire across all supported platforms. I'm sure either you lived or heard a lot of stories like, oh my God, I have done this Firebase installation, but I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that, and everything. Luckily, they have found a solution for this to make your life easier. For this, you need to open your terminal and you need to say .pub global activate Flutter Fire CLI. After you've done this, it will download a couple of packages. It will package the executables together, and it will at the end of the day say Flutter Fire CLI with the version name has been installed. It is not 1.0. It's still early, so you might see some bugs, but that is completely fine. If something doesn't work, just go and visit the Flutter Fire website, Flutter Fire GitHub, and let them know, because they're amazing people and they will do their best to help you out. So now that you have installed Firebase SDK for Flutter, what you need to do is you need to install the Firebase CLI as well. It is not installed together, and once you try to run it, it will tell you that, okay, you need to install the Firebase CLI tool. And it is not complicated. It is not something extra. What you need to do is you need to write this curl here, and it will automatically download what you need. But you can also go to the Firebase CLI official website, not to the Flutter one, but the Firebase one, and get any way of downloading that you need there. Once you run this curl, or once you run that command, whatever you need, what you need to do is check out if everything is installed, and you can see that Firebase Tools version 9.23.1 is installed. Now you have the Flutter CLI tool and Firebase CLI tool. Now you're ready to actually have your Flutter app as well. So let's create a Flutter app. For creating a Flutter app, you can simply do Flutter create and the project name. But with the version, I think 2.5 and later, now we have a new skeleton app, skeleton template. I decided to use that because I think it's more natural and it gives somehow an architectural opinion that you can use if you're especially a beginner. You need to do a Flutter create template skeleton. You can give the organization name by using --org and give the name. Once you write this into your terminal, you will have your application ready, and especially with after the Flutter version 2, like from the March, it's unstable. So once you create a new project, it will automatically have web for you. So you can see that web is created, and it has some icons and some index HTML and manifest JSON to make the web app running for you. So you have set up the system, you have the app now, and everything is ready. You must be feeling really proud. And once you run the app, it should show you something, right? So how do you run it? You can see that from the latest versions of Flutter, you can see that web is already supported, and it is already defined as one of the devices. Most likely, if it doesn't, you'll probably need to have Chromium tools or Chrome itself according to the operating system that you're on. If you go and say Flutter run -d, which is like the device, Chrome, it will say that, okay, now I will open up a Chrome page and I will run this. You can see that it shows like 3 items with sample items with some gear button there to change the theme and everything. I will show you later on. So we will take this and we will turn it into something that we would like to have by using also Flutter for web. So what we need to do is, first, we need to add the Flutter file to our project. What we need to do is, first, we need to go to the path of our project. So we need to direct ourselves there. After we direct ourselves there, if we write Flutter file, it will show us a couple of commands and helpful tools and so on. What we need to do is first do Firebase login, because we need to log in to be able to get the projects that we have installed in our console or like created on our console. After we do Firebase login, it will take us to the browser. You can pick the account that you have created the project with, select it, and the terminal will turn itself into something like success, logged in as the name or the email of the user. So after that, you're still on your product, sorry, you're still on your folder, everything is going fine. What you need to do is you need to configure the project by saying Flutter file configure. This will be running set of actions for you. And first, it will ask you to pick a project out of the projects that you have. So you can pick whatever you're using. We will be using this one, Firebase product example that we have created. And after we selected, it will arrange automatically all the supported platforms within our application to simply support each platform that we have within our application. It will say this is already registered, etc. And it will say, okay, I also created this successfully. So this Firebase options file, we will see it in a moment. It will keep the information about your project to be able to run it in the platform that it belongs to. Now that we have configured the project, what we need to do is we need to add the Firebase core library to the project that we have. Open up your terminal, write flutter pub add Firebase core, or go to pub.dev and look for Firebase core and add the latest version, whatever you prefer. After you select it, your project will be able to compile successfully. And by being successful, what you need to do is, so after being successful, what you need to do is you need to initialize the app later on. How you need to initialize is quite straightforward. You need to go to your main.dart file, and in that file, you need to add this 3 lines or 1 line, whatever the maximum character size that you have in your project. This default Firebase options comes from the Firebase options that we have created with Flutter 5 configure. It will just say current platform. It is smart enough to understand if it's web, iOS, Android, or desktop. And after you add this and run your project, now it is able to register itself to the Firebase console. So now that we have Firebase core functionalities ready, let's use one of the tools, which is the most famous one, Cloud Firestore, to actually have a saving mechanism in our project and real-time updates that I'm going to be showing you later on. So for adding the Cloud Firestore, again, you have 2 ways. One is Flutter pub add Cloud Firestore, which will take the latest version and add it to our pubspec.yaml file, or you can go to pub.dev, look for Cloud Firestore, copy the version, and add it to your project. Once you added it, do flutter pub get and load the library to your project as well. Now that it is done, let me tell you a bit about our project before we move forward. I call that MindNode. I'm not a native English speaker, so it probably doesn't make sense in English, but the idea is if you have something in your mind, put it to the node and send it directly. It doesn't have an authentication yet, so if you have the link, probably you can add anything that you want. And that is why it is open to add nodes for everyone. Anyway, so I wanted to have a tool like this, which is basically an empty wall that you can write anything, and only thing that we need is the node and the sender. So first, we will create the object that we need for that. It is called, smart enough, MindNode. It has a string of node, which is the node that I send, the sender, the name of the sender, as a person I'm going to give, and the date and time that it has been created. The rest is basically the convenience part that is for having an equals and hash code for the object to compare it better and so on. And last but not least, we have a static from JSON function to actually get the file from Firestore and turn it into an object. So now that we have the object, let's change some stuff in our skeleton application to actually follow the naming of MindNode. What we need to do is we need to create a new folder, or you can even rename the folder that you have in the skeleton app called simple item to MindNode and MindNode item. Like you need to just rename every simple item to MindNode. Oh, I picked the wrong word. Anyway, so after you rename all of these, and inside the classes, when you rename everything from sample item to MindNode item, you are good to go. Now we need to actually write some code to make everything running for us. I didn't show, by the way, the last product on purpose because we will do a demo at the end, so you'll see. Anyway, first, how can we listen to the data on Firebase? So Firebase has data in 2 ways. One of them is called collection. The other one is called document. Basically, document is the singular way of keeping the information, and collection is the set of documents gathering together as one piece of information. So if you want to listen to the collections, what you need to do is you need to get the instance of Firebase Firestore by this. This is a singleton object that is providing the same one all the time. I mean, normally you shouldn't, by the way, put your business logic into UI, but for the ease of readability, I wanted to keep this together. So you need to do a Firebase Firestore.instance. If you're reading collection, you need to say collection. If you're reading document, you need to say doc. And you need to write the name of the collection. After you write the name of the collection, you have two ways to read the data. You can subscribe to the stream of data, which is constantly updated, and you actually update with each change, or you can listen to the changes once and actually just show it once as well. What we do here is we are listening to the stream by saying snapshots. So with each snapshot change, with each change, it will send the data back to us. And it will say map, which means that you need to get the stream and turn it into something else, which is a mind node object that I created. And once we have the data, we will show it in the builder. But what do we have in our builder? If you run the skeleton app and compare the code that I'm showing you here, I didn't change much because I want you to understand the important changes that I did. So most of the code was already there because of the skeleton app. What I have added is I just had snapshot.data. If it's null, it is just giving me an empty list. And if it's not, then it will just give me an item builder, which is going to be creating items by the number of items that I have from the remote. And it will show the node in the title part of Lista. So it will show it on the top and send it to the bottom. So once we have these two together, it will show the information that we need here directly. So once we show the information, now we need to also have a way to actually send the information as well. For sending the information, what you need to do is you need to have some fields for your app to actually act on. What we have here is I just added a new floating action button here. It is called add mind node. It has a node and sender part, which is actually simply two text input text fields that are accepting any part of data, and they can't be null. That is what I expect. And once you click on this, it will automatically actually add this to the Flutter Firestore. So, but now that we have this UI in our minds, let's actually make it running for us. Imagine that we have this implemented, and what happens when we click on add mind node? So add mind node is technically a text button. It has a text add mind node here as a text widget, and on pressed, when it is pressed, what it's going to be doing is first it is going to be validating whatever field that I have. It's totally up to you. You don't have to have this. The most important part for you is it will get the instance of collection of mind nodes and add the data there as a map of string and dynamic, which is the way that actually we send the data as a map to the Firebase Firestore. And after it is added, it will just close the window and be done with it. So before I show you deploying, let's see how it looks like on the browser. So this is the app. Let me refresh so I know that it is not dead. So you can see that it is working on my local, and all of these are just some lyrics from this movie called Tick Tick Boom. It's in my head since I think 1 or 2 weeks now. It's a perfect movie. Watch it. Anyway, so what you can do is you can see that if I click, it will say node cannot be empty, sender cannot be empty, and I say ask the birds, and I would say let's say parser. So I have added 2 fields, and I added this. You can see that Ask the Birds is here, and shockingly, you can see that Ask the Birds is here somewhere on Mozilla as well. On the Mozilla, there is a deployed version of the app which is using a different theme, like it can be system theme, light theme, dark theme, etc. And it has been updated automatically without me doing anything, thanks to the Flutter Firestore. So thanks to this, we are actually able to have real-time updates between even browsers itself. Anyway, if we go back to the slides and continue from where we left off, let me take this here and make this full screen. Perfect. Now let's talk about deploying the app to the Firebase deployment. So like when you have the app, obviously for web, you need to be able to deploy it, right? You can have your continuous integration system like GitHub Action do that for you, or you can do it with using command line tools from Firebase itself. Let's learn how you can do it from your computer. First, what you need to do is you need to build the app to make it ready for actually deployment. So you need to do Flutter build web. If you do not write anything, it will automatically use the Xmas kit that I've been telling you about, which is the ski I use in WebAssembly version. Or you can do Flutter build web --web -renderer HTML, and your app will be creating an HTML rendered web app. It's totally up to you. As I said, the difference is like 2 megabytes, but the performance is a bit better on Xmas kit itself. So after you build the app, you can see that it is compiling your main.dart into something that web can understand. And if you go to the build folder under the root of your project and see web, you can see that it actually created a lot of different files for you, so your app can turn itself into a web application by using the Flutter way of things. And once you have this, this is the place that you are going to be actually deploying from. So what you need to do is you need to get this and put it to the Firebase that you have. So go to the root project of the Flutter and write Firebase in it. Once you write Firebase in it, it will show you a lot of different nice or not command line interfaces or like communications. What you need to do is you need to select the way that you want your Firebase app to have, which is you can have configure files for Firebase hosting for you, and optionally you can have GitHub Action deploy, or simply you can have GitHub Action deploy directly as well. You can pick the project that you would like to set up, and once you set up, this is the important point, people. What you need to do is first you need to define your public directory, the directory that you're going to be deploying, and this is build/web. And once it is done, it is asking you a couple of questions like it is a single page app and so on. You need to answer them according to your needs. Once it is answered, it will create a firebase.json file, which is the configuration file for Firebase CLI tool per project. And once it is done, you will be using Firebase deploy, the magic word, and it will be taking the build web and actually put it to the either URL that you define in your project, or it will generate a hosting URL for you under the name of your Google Cloud project.web.app. Once you have this, you can go and check out the website and you can see that it is working. And this is a project that we use for this one as well. Like this is Mozilla, it is working fine. You can see that you can click, you can go back and so on and so forth. And you can add notes and you can go to other pages as well. So it is already online. Anywho, let's have a conclusion and sum up, because I think I'm going slower. So first of all, you can see that Firebase have a first-class support for Flutter for all platforms. And even for Linux and Windows, there are support coming, and you will have your applications running from one code base for all possible places that you can imagine. You can use all web compatible libraries with Flutter for Web. All of them are in the stable version now. So Flutter Cloud Firestore was just an example. You can use anything that I've shown in the list in your application by simply using Flutter Fire CLI tool to enable your application. It is simple to use, it is easy to use, and it actually makes your life easier in all aspects. And lastly, please take advantage of Firebase deployment, not only from your CLI, but also from GitHub Actions and so on, to make your life easier and actually automate this stuff to have a better experience as an engineer. And that is all from me, folks. Thank you very much for listening. I'm really happy to tell you a bit about Firebase and Flutter. And yeah, that is more or less it from my side.
Thank you very much, Salih. Very interesting. So, as I said before, questions are going to be gathered and then answered at the end of the session, where we will have Mariam as well, where she might actually add some insights to that answer. So I think it's better to do it that way. So without further ado, I'm calling on stage Majid.
Hey,
And
can you hear me, by the way?
yes, I can hear you
That's
perfectly.
perfect.
And well, if you can share your slides, I can put
I
them on
will.
screen.
And I totally forgot, actually. Here you go.
All right, so the stage is yours, Majid.
All right, thank you very much. Let's get it started, maybe. Welcome, everyone. After an amazing talk by Salih, and he talked about Firebase and a bunch of great things over there on web. So I'm going to show you how you can actually take one step further and take your Flutter web application into a PWA and take a full control over your service worker in Flutter web. That is the first time I'm actually presenting right now this concept. And you'll see a lot today, which probably is not very familiar to you. So, but let's get into it. Building a PWA with Flutter Web, there are actually a bunch of reasons that I can give you related to this topic. We will get to that. So I bet that you have seen a lot of good examples. I'm not going to actually show you these examples. These are really familiar to Flutter developers. These demos has been built like years, and they are actually right now running offline because I deployed them somewhere in my hosting, and then you see these applications running offline completely in my slides. So my slides can also be run like completely offline. For Flutter and PWA, Flutter Web, in fact, has a couple of scenarios that fits very well. So, for example, building a PWA is one of them, progressive web applications. Or if you have a single page application, or if you have already an existing mobile app that doesn't have any public facing and you want to have some kind of user dashboard or something like that, that fits quite well. But by doing whatever we're going to talk about it today, you can actually go one step further and take even your existing mobile web application and single page application to a completely PWA progressive web app. So what I'm going to talk about today is generally a quick sum up of what is PWA and service worker and web app manifest, how these things together work. And also PWA in Flutter. We will review what Flutter gives us out of the box. So that is something that we're going to talk about it. And then most importantly, I'm going to show you how you can actually get rid of Flutter service worker and do your own service worker. And then maybe show you, if we get time, show you some cool demos that, you know, you can leverage those. Let me introduce myself for those who doesn't know me. My name is Majid. I am a Google developer expert for Flutter and Dart, a passionate software engineer working as a solution architect in Telia, Norway, and I'm also organizer of Flutter Vikings. So I need to take advantage of my stage right now and promote Flutter Vikings, because Flutter Vikings is going to happen in person. Finger crossed. I know the COVID situation we are observing for sure. And online in 2nd and 3rd of February. So go and grab your ticket for free for online, or maybe buy ticket for in person if you can join. All right, let's get started. PWA. And PWA characteristic relies on 3 different factors. They are reliable. It gives you this opportunity that you leverage caching, and it works completely offline, and you know, things like that. It's quite fast, and it must be engaging, like leveraging notification, push notification, and a bunch of other things. In fact, there are a couple of other things that it comes to PWA. Like, for example, they are by default secure. You have to have an HTTPS for your web application. That then, by default, it's one of the features of PWA. Or, as I said, the experience for your user for a PWA is like native like, and a bunch of other things. So we're not going to actually talk about PWA. But if you get into PWA, you see that a lot of new APIs. This is slides for 2019, and 2 years after, we still have a couple of new APIs in the browsers that gives you this opportunity to leverage web applications and bring them to the next level, work them do in some way that the web application works offline, or you can send messages or background things and things like that. But let's talk about them. There are 2 main parts in PWA. The main part is service worker. So that is it's called brain of a PWA. And then we have web app manifest, where it's just showing some schemas, names, themes, and things like that, which makes your application installable. All right, so you see some kind of installation alert in browsers, especially on mobile, and then you can install it. Comes to your home screen as well. You might not be very into the web app manifest, although I will share some ideas about it, but service worker is the most important part of it. For those who doesn't know what is service worker is actually acts like a proxy between your application and your servers. So everything that you request, you fetch, it goes to this proxy, and then you can manipulate that request and even the response. That is the interesting part of it. For example, what you can do in service worker is that when you make a request, you can cache it. And next time, when the same request exactly comes, you can return the response from the cache. We'll get to that, and you see more. There are a life cycle of service worker for service worker. Let's say the first step is installation. So, for example, if you have some kind of static assets, then here is the time that you can add them to cache. That's what we call it, pre-caching. And then the service worker become activated, where service worker is going to control your pages under the scope that you define. Or maybe you want to clean up and do something like that. And then from that time, where service worker is ideal, it's going to listen, or like waiting for, some request to come. And that one of them is going to be fetching, right? you fetch something, you fetch a CSS, you fetch an HTML, you fetch a JavaScript file, or so on and so forth, then in Service Worker, you can actually capture those requests and do something with it. And here is how it works. So you have a Service Worker file. Service Worker is a JavaScript file, right? So you have a JavaScript file called whatever.js, serviceworker.js. And here is the events, install, activate, and fetch. There you can do whatever you want, as I mentioned. But let's get to some example. Let's say that you are fetching. When I'm saying fetching, I'm actually like exactly mean fetch. This is literally fetch function in browser that that is not XML, XHR, or Ajax, as we all know. That is fetch, new API. And luckily, actually, in Flutter Web, you have that out of the box. You don't need to think about it. But so when you fetch something, let's say this JSON file, here is the time that you can do something with that, fetch request. You can cache it, and then you can come back with some kind of result later. For example, let me tell you, like, you have some kind of static assets. Generally, you want to cache these static assets because until the next release, they're going to stay the same, right? So the cache API in Service Worker and browser as well, it's a new API that you can cache your request and respond. And here is how you can cache them. You say, hey, please cache these files when the request is coming. And that is good. Then the next time when you fetch something, so you can respond with different things. We can respond from cache. You can respond with maybe other things. Let me give you an example here. There are a couple of cache strategies. Actually, I'm telling you these strategies because it's important for the next section of this talk. You need to know a little bit of these strategies. One of them is cache only. Like, you have cache, you match your request, and you respond for that request another type of respond, which you already cached in your cache storage, right? That's cache only. Always comes from cache. So you have another type, which is network only. So whenever a request comes, regardless, you're just going to fetch it again and respond it with that. That's network only. Never goes to the cache. There are a couple of other strategies. I'm not going to go through all of these strategies. You can read these codes, and it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to actually move faster to the Flutter part because that's the interesting part of this talk. But we have cache first, falling to network, and we have network first, falling back to cache, and a couple of other strategies as well. Before I get to the Flutter part, let's quickly review Web App Manifest, which is bringing this theming of, PWA to your application. So you're going to have name, background color, icon, and, theme color, and etc. So first of all, a manifest is just a JSON format file or web, that you can add it to your application. In fact, if you open your Flutter Web, the index.html file, you'll see this file. And the content is pretty easy to understand. So you have a name, you have icons, which defines the icons, you have start URL, background, and all the things that is defining the theming of your application. You can also find or debug this manifest under application tab in Chrome. So, but then now let's get into the PWA part in Flutter. First of all, so all the concept behind, this web is that you can compile. I'm not going to go to the Flutter web architecture. Most of you know that it compiles from the Dart file to JavaScript file by Dart to JS. It's leveraging this, idea, right? You can also write Dart file and compile it to JavaScript file. So the first thing that I need to mention here is that you have the manifest.json under the web folder in Flutter. That's fine. So that's easy to understand. Let's move on. I have more interesting stuff to mention. In Flutter 2. I think it was since 2.2 or 3 or something like that, we have a new way of registering service worker in Flutter Web, which is way more elegant. It's much better. So compared to the previous version, where you have a load main.js file is loading your main application file. That is fine when you have your service worker registered and everything is fine. Or there are a bunch of other things here. For example, taking over the page when there is a new service worker available and things like that. You can have a look at that. So it's a fairly straightforward. So where you register your service worker file, and this is something that you get out of the box right now with Flutter Web, right? You get this out of the box. So, and let's move on. When you build, Salih also mentioned, like the command is Flutter build web, right? When you build, you will see the service worker, Flutter service worker.js, which is giving you a bunch of things out of the box, but you don't have control over it, right? You can't change anything there. It's just generated completely automatically. What you see then here is, let's quickly review that. For example, you see the resources. These are the assets that are generated in build time. And Flutter knows that these are your static assets. And these are the assets that can go to the pre-cache. So every time you load your application, these assets can come from the cache, from service worker cache. So you don't need to load them again. And that is fantastic. And that's the reason Flutter PWA right now, after the second time, after the first loading, the second time, the subsequent loading, let's say, they are all very fast because the static asset all comes from the cache and they're very fast. And this is a hash table where it defines, like, if, for example, a file is changing, so it can invalidate the cache if necessary for that particular file. And here is another part where you have those cache installed and then you add them to, to the cache, as I mentioned. I'll show you where it goes when we're caching. These are all built in the service worker generated by Flutter. You don't need to change anything. This comes out of the box. Then you have activate event, where it's technically what it does is just mostly going and cleaning up the cache if it's necessary. So if anything has changed, or if the service worker is new, it's going to just clean up in this event here. And the most important one is the fetch event. When you go to Flutter Web, well, if you use Navigator 1, for example, maybe you have the hash bank and you navigate different, pages. Here is where Flutter is caching the pages. And next time when you're loading, it actually returns those pages from cache. And that's the reason you will see Flutter is working offline when you enable service worker. By default, it's enabled, by the way. So, well, if you run your application, then you will see, perfect. You see an install on Chrome and all of the browsers that are supporting manifest and installation, add to home screen, let's say. And perfect. So you made already out of the box a PWA by Flutter. But, so there are a couple of things. In fact, before I say how we can extend that, that is the, I think, cool part. So let me show you the caching storage. So you can find the cache storage under application, and for example, in Chrome, and go to cache storage, and you will see all of the caching storage that Flutter is opening and actually adding request and respond together over there. So next time when you load your application, so the cache, if it's matched in the storage of the cache, then it will return, the response. But here is the part. So far, everything is out of the box by Flutter, and you don't have much control. And what if, for example, Salih mentioned about a couple of APIs in Firebase? Well, of course, Firebase has some kind of features for making the request offline. But what if you have a REST API and you want to cache some kind of API request or respond? What if you actually have some other things that you want to cache, like maybe Google Web Fonts? So you have Google Web, and then you want to actually cache that. So you don't have control. You can go, and after you build your Flutter Web, and technically go there and open the service worker file and add whatever you want to add. That's one way of doing that. But every time you build, that is going to be overridden. Like you have to have some kind of script to add or inject those new things. Or maybe you can actually take or eject, let's say, service worker from Flutter Web and take full control over it. You do it yourself. And every time you build, after you build, you generate your service worker. So you can do that for sure. And but there are easier way to do. I'm going to show you the shortcuts. Here is a little bit of JavaScript. I hope that is fine with you, but I also have some news after these slides to tell you about the Dart version of that. But let's skip to the JavaScript part. There is a library in the JavaScript world for PWA applications called Workbox, where you can generate service worker as simple as possible. It's quite powerful package or library that is built by Googlers and maintained by Googlers. So it's all supported, or backed by Google. What you can do, well, first of all, you need to have Node installed on your machine and NPM. If you're not familiar with JavaScript, that is simple. Don't worry about it. So you just need to install Node.js, and then you're going to have NPM. Then you need to install Workbox CLI, as you see in the screen. It gives you a command line tools, then you can do a bunch of things. Workbox has several different ways of generating service worker. And in JavaScript world, usually you have some kind of bundler, something like that, Webpack or Rollup or something like that. So you can add those plugins of Workbox, and that is taking care of everything. But because we don't have those things in Flutter, and we don't want to hook up to the build pipeline of Flutter, we want to do it something out of that, then we can use Workbox CLI here. Okay, I installed the Workbox CLI, and by just running Workbox, I see that I can do a bunch of things. For example, I can do a wizard, which asks me a few questions, and then it generates service worker for me. Not something I really want. And then there is another type or mode, as they said, it's generate SW. That is something like you have a configuration, and then you configure everything in that file, and then it will generate everything for you. So you have a little bit of control, but not full control. And another mode is inject manifest, where you still have some kind of configuration, but most of the implementation is by you done in a service worker placeholder. So you have full control over it. We're going to talk about inject manifest. First thing first, you need to create two files in your Flutter application, sw.js and workbox.config.js, or whatever you want to call it, config.js or whatever. So in fact, the Workbox config is fairly simple for the way that we're going to build our service worker. So let's look at that. So you need to define where will be the build folder. When you are building your application, your Flutter application, usually it goes to build /web, right? You define that, and you need to define what kind of assets you want to add to pre-cache. We talked about pre-cache. Flutter is doing that by default for you. But Workbox, by setting up this pattern, you can say all of my JSON, fonts, JavaScript, WASM, PNG, everything that you have that is an static asset, you can add it here and say, hey, please identify them and then add them to cache. And then you say, okay, I'm going to also have a sw.js file. That is my placeholder for where I write my JavaScript file, my service worker file, and then the destination. So then Workbox CLI will generate based on what you are writing in the placeholder adding those things that you added to the global patterns all the way, and then it creates one Java service worker in the build.web folder. All right. There are a bunch of things that you can add to config. So let's move on that. First thing in the sw.js, the placeholder that I mentioned. First thing first, you want to add the static cache, static assets to pre-cache, right? All the static ones after the Flutter file is built. And that's one thing that you can do by simply either importing, if you have some kind of bundler, or you can set up that, or directly import a script. That is the script, the latest version that I get, but you can always copy the latest version. And then get the pre-cache and route, strategy, and say there is actually a constant here, which is saying WB manifest. That is going to automatically detect all of the static assets in your build folder in Flutter Web, then add them to the service worker, just like what Flutter is doing automatically for you. So now you will go and build your application. First of all, you look at this here. I'm going to say, hey, Flutter Web, please, for PWA strategy, do not generate anything. I'm not really interested in your service worker. So just passing down here. You're going to go and say after that to Workbox, hey, Workbox, now you have it in CLI, and then you have the inject manifest, and then you pass the configuration file that you have. And Workbox is going to generate a service worker for you and place it under the build folder generated for you. And look at this picture right now. It is going to detect all of the static assets that you define as a pattern and add them to the pre-cache. You can always ignore, exclude, and do all of the other things as well. So it's just a simple example here. But that's good. So now you can add all of the static assets. This is pretty much similar to what Flutter so far is doing, like the service worker. That's the first part. But the thing here is that now you have control over your static assets too. You can have a bunch of other things in statically for Flutter, copy that to your, Flutter Web, and also cache them automatically. So this is quite powerful without even Flutter knows about them. And next, for the most important thing is that, so you need to also change the service worker, Flutter service worker.js file that Flutter is automatically adding for you in index.html, and replace it with your sw.js or whatever service worker that you're creating. By doing this, so far, you don't need to do anything else. I mean, that's fine. Now you have full control over your service worker and it should work. But I'll give you more example and see how I will change the index.html in Flutter and add more script over there to take more control. What can we do now with this service worker? I mean, the pre-caching is one thing, but we need to do a bunch of other things. Flutter already is doing a bunch of other things. It's catching the pages, routing, and other things. One thing you can do simply is you can add Google Analytics for analyzing or like sending some statistic to Google Analytics for offline pages. When you go offline, then you can send some parameters. That is the first thing you can do. I mean, you can add that to your service worker folder. It's not possible directly to do that in service worker for Flutter. Or you can define different route because, each URL origin or each URL that is you're requesting, it's a fetch request, right? You can do something with it. For example, let's say you are adding Google fonts and you want to cache them. Next time, when everything is offline, when the network is flanky and you want to just show something quickly, then you can retrieve those, data for Google Fonts from cache. And here is an example in this screen. You can add, let's say, I have fonts, googleapi.com. Please, everything in this origin, register and add them to a cache storage. What I call that Google Fonts style sheet. Or sometimes they come from gstatic.com. Please add them to cache and also do a bunch of other things. For example, it'll expire these cache after some times because I want to retrieve. And these are specific to the workbox things. So you can learn about it in the documentation. But the point here is that you can register your route. We can now do a lot more. Let's say you're building a Hacker News application. You want to add the basic Hacker News get requests, all the get requests from Hacker News, and store it in your application. So the application next time is loading with some cache data. Here is where you can do that. You can say, hey, this is my API. You can have the specific API as well. Add these two stories. And next time when there is a fetch, you can retrieve it from cache. So that's good. I have a demo for you. So you get the whole idea right now. You can register routing. You can generate your service worker completely under your control. You can do whatever you want. And well, I will show you a demo. And before that, let me give you a scenario here. Many times you've gone to some PWA and you see that there is a pop-up somewhere, maybe in button or maybe on top. It says, hey, we have a new version of our application. You need to reload. Probably you have seen this pattern a lot, right? And that is because they're taking advantages of service worker and they already recognize that the new service worker is registered, but the page is using the old one. Therefore, the data is coming from cache from the old version. So by just reloading the page, the service worker will take over the page, the new one, and then everything will be up to date. Here is the pattern you can do in Flutter Web. I just wrote for you an example. You can get rid of all the script in Flutter Web, which you already have in index.html. You can write a simple service worker file, which is sw.js, as you see, and you can register your file. And then when service worker is actually taking over, there is an event controlling, and then you can pass that to a UI prompt. For example, just had a confirm in JavaScript, and you can show a user something to your user. Hey, you can say to your user, hey, you probably have a new version. You need to reload. You need to click and reload, and then you can do something with it, right? Here is an example of that pattern that you can do. Register your service worker, do that as well, and register and load your main .js file as well. So, and one thing you need to do is in your service worker file, then you need to have a message event where it's listening to the messages coming, and then it will go and make sure that the service worker is taking over the page immediately. And when you come to the page as a user, you'll see this pop-up. And that is exactly what I'm going to show you right now. You see a pop-up and say, hey, a new version of your service worker is downloaded and registered, whatever message you have. And then you go ahead and reload your page. This is something that you can do for your user. You're just taking your Flutter Web into a next level right now, giving a better user experience to your user. But before I show you the demo, don't forget that, of course, you can still use Navigator 1. That is good. That's fine. But if you use Navigator 2.0, you get a lot more, let's say, out of the box. First of all, in the navigation part, by the way, you can also join my Twitter space regarding navigation tomorrow night if you're watching today. And because you can have the path strategy in Navigator 2, for example, and you can have like nested routing, and you can have deep linking and stuff like that, you can also go ahead and cache those requests as well independently and do something in your service worker. So I recommend you for Flutter Web, go for Navigator 2 if you can. And there are a bunch of packages that can help you to do that. All right. Let me ask you, first of all, if I have 5 more minute time. So give me some thumbs up or something if I have time. Yep. Okay, that's good. So let me show you then this application. All right. Here's the application that I actually showed you the slides for. So it's a simple application. I just replaced the service worker installation replaced it with what Flutter we had already, replaced it with service worker. I already have a bunch of routing registered for, like, as I mentioned here. And there is something that I have for you here. Look at this part that I commented. I want to show you what it is and how you can leverage that, which you can't do that with the predefined service worker by Flutter Web. So let me just quickly go and run this application. All right. So I already have ran this application. So if I open it right now, it is actually showing some kind of application. You see that my service worker from Workbox is taking over, and you see the logs here, and you see the notification because I changed something in my service worker, and now it installs again because I run it right now. Then it's saying, hey, there is a new version of your service worker, and I'm just saying, okay, it will gonna go and reload. That's perfect. So what I'm gonna show you here, then it's the network tab. Look at the network tab. So what you see here is, if I go to all, but let me just make it bigger. These are all the requests that is coming. And a bunch of them are already coming from service worker. You see, for example, the manifest, the PNG, the fonts, a bunch of them are not coming from service worker. And that is one of them is CanvasKit.js, for example. You see that it doesn't come from service worker. Therefore, if I make my application offline, the next time it's loading and it doesn't load because it goes over the wire and you want to fetch this and it doesn't, we don't have internet and it doesn't load, right? So I want to show you how you can cache this right now. So the request here is, that is the request. That is the whole URL for the request. So either you can just cache this directly, or you can register everything under this package. Under this origin. So everything under that, please go ahead and add it to the cache. Another example is this WASM file. The WASM file is adding here, and then you can also add that to your service worker. Just an example. Let me show you here now how you can do that. Here is, first of all, let me just stop this. Here is the example that I gave you. I saw that, okay, the register routing is a function in Workbox from routing module. Then you can say, hey, my origin, I want this origin. Whenever it's coming something from there, the package, please add to the cache that I'm opening as assets on package assets storage name. And use the stale while revalidate, which means use always cache unless there is a new version, and then add it to the cache and revalidate that file for me. That is good. So I already add this. So I already added to my placeholder. Then what do I need to do? I need to build again my application. That's good. That's gonna be fast for this small application. And then I need to build my service worker. And here is the new service worker. So it's going to do whatever I told to service worker. If I now go to builds, to web, and look at my service worker file, you see that this is added. All right, that's good. That means I added a new thing to my service worker. So I'm going to go and run this application one more time. So I will close this tab completely and open it again. So first thing first, I need to see a new pop-up again because my service worker has changed. So I need to see somehow a new notification that is coming. Here is coming. So the new service worker is now taking over. So therefore I need to say, okay, I know, and then I'm gonna reload, And then everything is coming from cache. Look at this here right now. Last time when I showed you this, it was coming from network, right? And now this is coming from service worker. This is coming from cache. Now this is cache. This is beautiful because if I go and make my application offline, so my application should work without any problem. And it's working. I don't have internet and it's working and it's quite fast because everything is coming from cache. And where are those cache? So here is the cache storage that I showed you in the slides. The assets are storing here. I'm actually storing them here. So, or the Google fonts are here. So the request is storing with the response here. And here is the fact. Now you can extend your service worker and the PWA functionality and take your Flutter Web application into next level, adding a bunch of stuff here for performances related stuff or a bunch of other things that you can do. This is quite cool for sure. You can leverage the Workbox JavaScript ecosystem and do something with your Flutter Web. You need to deal with some JavaScript for sure. That is inevitable because, well, web is full of JavaScript and, you know, so you need to deal with it somehow. However, I started way back. Well, I don't have much time to work it like continuously on that, but I started a Workbox Dart version. Hopefully, at some point in 2022, I will be able to give you Workbox Dart where you write your service worker completely in Dart. And you generate everything, you hook into the Flutter build, and then you generate your service worker with full control in Dart, and then you get everything out of the box. And that will be something cool that I'm working right now. Feel free to reach out if you want to contribute to this project, which I started. All right, so far, we talked about the PWA fundamental, how service worker is powerful and make your application, you know, into the next level to make a fully offline application and take and leverage the functionalities that is available in service worker. And we talked about manifest. And at the end, I have a bunch of other talks and, you know, recommendations regarding advanced PWA patterns where with what I explained today with Flutter Web, you can leverage all of them in your Flutter Web application technically. With that said, thank you very much for listening to me. I went 10 minutes over time. It's 40 minutes that I'm speaking at almost, but I hope that you enjoyed what I presented to you and you can take leveraging these concepts to your Flutter application next time. Feel free to reach out to me with this handler on different social media and find the slides on slides.com/myhandler. So thank you. You are muted.
Yeah, that's the catchphrase of 2021, right? You're muted. So thank you very much, Majid. Very, very interesting slides and presentation. I'm gonna bring Salih on stage.
Hey, hey.
And we're kind of waiting on Mariam. She might join couple of minutes. Until then, I just have one request for you, Majid. If you can give the Viking conference link in Twitter, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. I just posted on Twitter.
All right, great. Because we had one request. And a lot of people are happy. So we either wait for Mariam or we can start like answering a couple of questions.
Sure, let's go for it.
All right. So let's see. First question. Does anyone have?
I think let's read the question. I have developed one web application in Flutter and in iOS Safari browser. It shows blue color. enlarge part of the status bar. Can you please tell me how can change that is in iOS Safari browser? Yes. Well, I think if I understood what you mean, I think it's more or less related to. All right, there are a bunch of meta tag in index.html file in Flutter Web, which is dealing with some inconsistency in iOS. You can search and find them over internet, and then you can add them. There are a bunch of them already in Flutter. You can find them in index.html, but you can also take over of other ones. If I understood this question correctly, otherwise you can expand or elaborate what you mean. But I think you mean about. Go ahead, Sally. Do you have something?
No, please. Sorry.
I think he mentions about the status bar when the address bar is, and like maybe somewhere there where it's coming with different color. And usually the default color is blue. So you can change it for sure also in manifest, but manifest is not supported by Safari, I think. Then you need to do it with meta tag.
Right.
Is it also, can it be also related to the render as well? Maybe Canvas Kit has a bug in the.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. That's why I said elaborate it a bit.
Yeah.
Mariam is with us, so I'm gonna add her to the screen and welcome her.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Mariam. Welcome. So we're going through some questions that we have from the presentations, and maybe you can shed some light from having insights from the team. And let's move forward. So there is one question asked twice by the same person.
I can take this one if you want.
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And yes, in the future. There is ways to do it now. It's very hacky. Flutter, the way it's built is to give you flexibility so you can always find a way to do something. But if you haven't seen on Medium, I did post what we're looking forward to next, and there's a bunch of issues and things that we're addressing. And I think the article's called What's Next for Flutter Web. But one of the things we are looking at is how to give you kind of a loading API so that you know how long is it taking to load. So not just addressing kind of Canvas Kit's download size and the increase in initial app load time, but also addressing you and powering you with information that you can create splash screens or loading indicators or landing pages before your PWA actually launches. And so we're working through an entire design right now and hoping to start implementation soon. So just keep a lookout in the issue that's in that blog. You'll probably see some PRs. Feel free to comment as you see things. We'll probably share the design doc, and then hopefully it meets the needs that you have.
Perfect. Thank you, Mariam.
Yeah.
We have another question. Can we invalidate manifestation file and generate it at runtime each time the web app is opened? So who's going to take this? No takes?
I'm trying to understand exactly the use case. So is the issue that you're trying to tackle with this, is it because the cache, you're trying to reset the cache? There are ways that we've set for service workers to help you do that so that you don't have to regenerate the manifest constantly. But if that's still running into an issue, I would say file it on GitHub so that we can look into it, because we want to solve that. I think if the other part of it is you think it's just taking too much space, I think we have a way of deferring possibly that. Again, if you want to file an issue of exactly what you're trying to do, we can definitely look at it and give you a suggestion, or it might just be an issue on our side.
Nice. Definitely go for it. And we have another question. A ARM processor controlling by Flutter Web or mobile app? Kind of cryptic. But
Yeah.
I want to say
Um,
yes.
I guess like for at least for Flutter Web, we compile not with ARM because that's not native on the browser. We're compiling with JavaScript, or we're using WASM and WebAssembly or Web GPU. So I'm not really sure exactly what this question is asking.
okay, let's go to the next one, and maybe which actually has a name. So Majid, when you compile and build for web a JavaScript file, JavaScript created under the web folder, how can you manually write JavaScript code without getting overwritten every time you compile, and how to integrate the code?
Yeah. Well, if it's referring to what I presented, I showed you that I created something completely out of Flutter Web even folder, and that was in root folder, for example. You can also keep it in the web folder. That's not a problem. And then the CLI, which I mentioned, the Workbox CLI, is taking care of that placeholder, the JavaScript file, and generating a new file. Or every time when you build after that, you run that script, and then it generates that JavaScript file and put it under the web build folder. So technically, that is the way you're handling your JavaScript files manually. You have a placeholder, some script. In this case, it was Workbox, which was generating the service worker and putting that the new service worker under Flutter Web folder.
All right, great, thank you for that. So in regards to invalidating manifest JavaScript, the person who asked actually said he was trying to make quick actions work on web and got stuck on that. So just to clarify where this comes from.
Okay. Yeah, I would file an issue. I think that might be a new feature we'd have to add as part of PWA. But because I think PWA, we have like the basic support. We still don't have push notifications and things like that.
Yep.
So quick actions might be a new feature. So definitely file it so that we can work on it.
Cool.
I
I
can
think it's a generic question.
I can give a generic kind of answer, or maybe more detailed. But so okay, this goes into what should you use Flutter Web for. PWAs. I mean, the web is huge, right? You can build websites from New York Times to Mint.com, which is kind of like your financial banking, to Rive, right? Like design editors. And so if you look at where Flutter is and how we've architected, where we're best suited is apps, as close to the app experience as possible as you're getting. If your banking app has a lot of dynamic interactions, there's a lot of user interactivity, your users are moving pieces, you need animations, you need really seamless transitions, and you're trying to be multi-platform. If it's something that you want users to be able to download through the App Store and you want it to run on a browser so it's easy for them to use it without having to install, Flutter is a good choice. Where it comes to, if it's a banking app where it's a lot of tables and static content, I personally wouldn't use Flutter. We're not ready for it. If it needs things like indexability, we're not ready for it. So yeah, I don't know if that helps, but that's how I would think about your use case.
Good, thanks. And I think this is kind of an explanation of the ARM processor question. Like, so let me read it. Can a PWA of Flutter can control a vending machines as like in supermarkets, mostly seen in Japan, because I saw a PWA app in a restaurant and we ordered food via it. So I guess kind of like an explanation / question.
Yeah, I mean, a PWA runs on the browser, right? And it's basically it's built for with web, and then you install it to anything you're using. It's basically trying to let web apps that are built feel like native apps and be used like native apps without having to install them from the from the app store. So like TVs have browsers, right? And so sometimes they can also have PWAs, but they're technically not a laptop or a PC. So I'm sure if that vending machine or whatever the device the restaurant is using has a browser, then it can have a PWA.
All right. And I guess this question is also related to that. Is kind of like, can this Flutter Web can be able to control IoT devices? Again, like kind of the browser thing you mentioned, Mariam.
One thing that I would like to say is, so things doesn't have to be Flutter Web to be able to run somewhere. So right now we're talking about Flutter Web. Our focus is on Flutter Web, but imagine IoT devices under the roof of Raspberry. Raspberry can have a custom embedder that can host the Flutter app and behave accordingly. So you can have a custom embedder that has been created for your Flutter applications that is acting like a home automation system, for example. You don't have to have PWA or Flutter Web for this, but it still have Flutter in it.
Very good observation, Sally. Yes, you can actually port Flutter to different devices. Yeah. And one last question, which is I left for the end because it's kind of like, yeah, so it's kind of like paves the way for you, Mariam, to give like the overview of 2022, what to expect from Flutter Web.
Yeah, I'm actually working on that right now. So it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, this past year was all about us getting to a stable release, getting to a point where we felt that people could build production apps. It's kind of like if you think about Flutter's history of when mobile first went 1.0, right? We still have gaps, we still have a lot of work to do, but we feel ready for the things that we know we're really good at. We had a lot of our early adopters ship, and so that was a good signal for us to kind of put it into stable release in an effort to let people who only build against stable also use Flutter Web. Now that we've hit stable, it's the matter of really maturing our product. So I think for 2022, I hope you guys see that the maturity of Flutter Web starts to reach the potential of where mobile is right now. We are putting all our bets into really fixing our performance, decreasing our download size with Canvas Kit, really trying to hone that so that it works well with the web. The web is supposed to be fast, performant, right? We want to be able to do all the splice things. Indexability is still farther than 2022. So please don't take what I just said as, oh, you're gonna get SEO. I think for us, we want to make sure that we're good at the things that we are really good at right now, which is apps. We want to be able to take apart a piece of the web because the web is so big and be really good at that before we try to tackle everything else that it involves. So that's really at least the beginning of 2022. And that's how we're thinking about it. We're breaking up 2022. We're thinking of what's the first half look like, and then we'll think about how the second half looks like. So the first half, you can expect a lot more maturity, a lot around performance, a lot around making it feel more like it belongs on the web. So being able to select text across multiple widgets, we're hoping to get that. Being able to do more with less. So there's so many other web experiences, like I said, like New York Times, right? And we want to be able to give features where you can kind of add to app. So you don't have to build your entire website or web app again with Flutter, but you could take pieces that maybe you have with Flutter Mobile and embed them into your existing web experiences. So you can leverage Flutter for those dynamic pieces without having to worry about the static being just as good. So giving you more opportunities to use Flutter and its advantages in different ways. That's what 2022 right now looks like. But again, we basically built stable based on your feedback. So when you see that quarterly survey coming out, give us your feedback. What do you want to see? When you see me in talks, give me those questions, give me that feedback. Kind of also tweet at us, let us know what you're building so that we know what kind of things you're trying to build as we think about our future.
All right. Nice insight. Thank you, Mariam. Actually, we have one last question just squeezed in.
Yeah.
Last time. So how good Flutter Web works for different browsers, especially Safari? Any noticeable things we need to take care?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is another thing I hope to tackle in 2022. And when I say I, the team, we want to be in a place where Flutter is something that you think about what you want to build and not where you're building. And that goes for web. So we don't want you to have to think about, is there a feature that's not going to work on this browser or that browser? We're not there yet. There are some discrepancies, especially with Safari. And I say that because Safari is still behind in kind of that WebGL landscape. And because a lot of you seem to use CanvasKit, and because one of our auto render options is CanvasKit, you will see discrepancies between Safari and the other browsers. And we are trying our best to handle that in the background for you. But again, if you see those issues, file them so that we can handle them for you. So we're hoping to get to a point where you don't have to worry about keeping it consistent. You just build what you want to build, and we do as much as we can to make sure that it's just a consistent experience regardless of browser.
All right. Perfect. I think we addressed every question and also got some insight. So that's really nice. I think we can end it on this note, right?
Were there any questions? Because I don't know if I joined a little late. Were there any questions that I missed that maybe I could?
No, we gathered
Okay.
all questions at the end so that
Okay.
we can have your insights as well.
Okay, cool.
So I think we can end it in that note. Thank you very much, everyone who attended. And thank you, Majid, Salih, Mariam, and also Thanos. I can bring him on stage as well. All right. So perfect. Let's end it here. Have a great day, night, morning, wherever you are. And see you in the
Thank you
next
very
one.
much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very
You
much.
too. All
Thank
the
you.
best. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great rest of the year, everyone.
Merry
You
Christmas, by the
too.
way.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Happy
All the
holidays.
best.
Happy holidays.